The fate of the Senate and what President-elect Joe Biden can accomplish in his first 2 years will come down to the two runoff elections in Georgia. Democrats must flip both seats to win the upper chamber's majority for the first time since 2014. Republicans need to win just one. One race will feature incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue. He's up against 33-year-old Jon Ossoff. Perdue fell under the 50% threshold to avoid the runoff once mail-in ballots were tallied. The state's special election will be between the Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock and Senator Kelly Loeffler. Neither candidate came close to hitting that 50% mark in the November election. The races are likely to come down to the Peach State's Latino voters. Mr. Biden won them by a 62 to 37% margin, but how many of those voters show up at the polls could make the difference. For more on Georgia, I want to bring in Chuck Rocha. He's a former senior advisor to Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 presidential campaigns. He's also the author of Tio Bernie, the inside story of how Bernie Sanders brought Latinos into the political revolution. Chuck, welcome. Great to have you with us. So you argue in an op-ed for The Guardian that Latinos could swing these special elections in Georgia. As you note, there are nearly 1 million Latinos in the Atlanta metro area alone. 300,000 of the state's Latino registered voters don't identify, though, as either a Democrat or a Republican, making up about 5% of the overall electorate. Do you believe that those Latino voters are still up for grabs for either side in the Georgia special elections?
I do, and because there's not going to be a big turnout for the runoff, the big goal here is not going to be exciting a bunch of people who didn't vote in November, but it's getting as many of the people that voted in November back to vote January, right after New Year's. That's going to be a big challenge for both parties. And you're going to see a lot of the political posturing that's going to be done by both parties as we head towards January around who can get their base motivated to show up. The Latino population in Atlanta and in Georgia is part of this emerging demographic explosion that's happening all throughout the state of Atlanta and Georgia. Not only with Latinos, with young African Americans, with Asian voters. You've just seen this state become a lot more diverse over the years. So it's trending to be more democratic. And with somebody as polarizing as Donald Trump on the top of the ticket, this is a big reason you've seen a boost in turnout with Black and brown and Asian voters in the state.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Latino population in Georgia, because one of the things that you understand and that I understand as a Cuban American is that Latinos in this country have vastly different, policies that they're looking to promote. They come from different backgrounds. So if you think about Latinos in the Southwest or California, you're thinking largely Mexican American. And if you think of Latinos in Florida, it's more of a Latin American background. So this Latino group in Georgia that you're targeting here for these races, or that we're talking about, what is their background? Where are they from, and what are their priorities?
It's such a great question. What you've seen in Georgia is this explosion in demographics and this explosion in population. Well, that is driven because there was lots of people moving there over the last 10 to 30 years because it's cheaper to live there. There's lots of jobs there. Well, guess who did all that construction? Guess who built all of those businesses and all of those jobs? You had Latino immigrants who moved there 30 and 20 years ago that were part of this construction explosion. Well, guess what? All their children now who are U.S. citizens have all come of age in this state, and other immigrants have come as well. So what you have is a Latino population that's predominantly over 75% Mexican Americans. And most of them are young Mexican Americans whose fathers and mothers came there for service jobs or construction jobs, who now are studying to be doctors and lawyers and going to school. They're a lot more part of the fabric of America, and they're reacting in a way to politics. You see a lot of young people, right? They were pushed off saying they don't vote. Well, guess what? They showed up. Over half of the Latinos that showed up to early vote in Georgia had never voted before. So that's who we're really targeting now, is these new Latinos in Georgia who have come of age.
You make such a good point, because on the one hand, they're young, right? That's almost as important as the fact that they're being as they are Latino, right? Because you know that the young vote is going to skew demographic regardless of background or demographic. So, so how many would you say? Do you have numbers on how many of these young Latinos are first-time voters there in Georgia?
One thing that jumps off of the charts when you look and dig down into the numbers is all of these newly registered Latinos in the state have registered as no party preference. So they don't identify as Republicans or Democrats.
Right.
Because they're younger, they became to be more progressive. They really loved Bernie Sanders. They're a lot more outward thinking than their mothers or their grandmothers, but there's a lot more of them. So it's the Democrats' case to go in now and start early and say why they should be voting for the Democrat. Most of them voted for the Democrat in the general election just because of their hatred for Donald Trump. We just see that in polling and focus groups one after another. Now we have to give them a compelling reason of why the Senate should be Democrat and what are the issues that are going to directly affect them to get them to vote for a Democrat in a Senate special election right after New Year's.
So interesting. So, of course, another point that you make is that a mistake that a lot of, Democratic organizers make is that, the Latino vote is monolithic or that it can be relied on to be a Democratic vote. You say, no, that's not the case, that, Latino groups are specific and they really want outreach. So are there policy messages Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff should adopt to help turn out those Latino voters in Georgia, to get them excited to go into the polling places?
Because our demographic in Georgia is younger, we're more transient, you want to talk about raising the minimum wage. The minimum wage in Georgia is $5 an hour. It's even lower than the federal minimum wage. Can you imagine if you're talking to people in Georgia about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour? You want to talk about access to getting people more health care and jobs in the economy, but I think this is the most important. What are you going to do to help them out of this COVID hole right now? Latinos have been overly affected by COVID. 3 times more of our population has caught it. Our children are 8 times more likely to catch it. So we want to know, why are we not getting the relief package? Why, if we live in a Latino mixed status family where one of our members is a DACA recipient, we didn't get any relief? These Senate candidates need to take that on and say, we're going to be here to make sure that you're treated as a U.S. citizen. You get some of this COVID relief, and if you elect me, we're going to get it to you right away.
All right. Well, Chuck, Rocha, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.